The residents of Frosthollow still speak in hushed tones. About that winter, the one that brought a starving wolf to little Sophia Hayes' doorstep. While others reached for rifles, this 10-year-old girl reached for something else. Her lunchbox, what? Unfolded the following. Dawn left her grandfather speechless and the town reeling. The wolf returned. But what it brought with it challenged everything. These mountain people thought they understood about the wilderness surrounding their struggling community. As word spread of Sophia's encounter, the town fractured between those demanding protection and those sensing something unprecedented was occurring in their forgotten corner of the world. No one could have foreseen how critical this unusual connection would become when the century's worst blizzard descended without warning, with roads impassable and communication lines down both human and animal residents faced a deadly threat. What happened next has become the stuff of local legend. How a child's simple act of compassion forged an unlikely alliance that would not only save lives during those desperate days, but ultimately resurrect a dying town. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Winter came early to Frosthollow. That year, by mid-November, the small mountain town was already blanketed in 3 ft of snow, with more falling steadily in the Hayes family cabin on the outskirts of town. 10-year-old Sophia pressed her nose against the frosted window, watching as the world disappeared beneath a canvas of white. "Grandpa, do you think the animals are cold?" Sophia asked, her breath creating small clouds on the glass. Martin Hayes looked up from his newspaper, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening as he smiled at his granddaughter. "They've got their fur coat, sweetheart, nature provides, but this snow is different." Sophia insisted. "You said so yourself." Martin couldn't argue with that. In his 68 years living in these mountains, he'd never seen a winter arrive with such osity. The old-timers in town were calling it an omen. The younger folks blamed climate change, whatever the cause. Frosthollow was suffering, the smart ones have prepared, he finally said. Folding his newspaper just like we did from the kitchen, Elena Hayes called out, "Sophia, lunch is ready." The cabin was modest but warm, heated by a crackling wood stove that Martin kept fed with logs from the pile he'd spent all summer building. Photographs lined the walls. Sophia as a baby, her parents on their wedding day, 4 generations of the Hayes family standing in front of the cabin. The newest photos showed Michael and Sarah Hayes, Sophia's parents, standing in front of gleaming office buildings in the city where they'd gone to find work. After the sawmill closed, Sophia sat at the table while her grandmother placed a steaming bowl of venison stew in front of her. "Eat up." Elena said, "You need your strength for your lessons later." "Can I go check the bird feeders after lunch?" Sophia asked, blowing on a spoonful of stew in this weather. Elena frowned. "I don't think let her go," Martin interrupted. "She'll bundle up. Besides, those chickies depend on her now." Sophia beamed at her grandfather since her parents had left for the city 8 months ago, promising to send for her once they were settled. Her grandparents had become her whole world. Her grandfather understood her best. Her love for the outdoors, her fascination with the wildlife that inhabited the mountains surrounding their home. After lunch, Sophia pulled on her insulated boots, her heaviest coat, and the wool hat her grandmother had knitted for her birthday. She filled a small bucket with birdseed and grabbed her lunchbox from the counter. "You didn't eat your sandwich," Elena noted. "I'm still full from the stew." Sophia replied, "I'll save it for later." Outside, the cold hit her like a physical bore stealing her breath for a moment before she adjusted. The snow was still falling, but more gently now in fat, lazy flakes that settled on her eyelashes. Sophia trudged through the drifts to the 3 bird feeders her grandfather had helped her install last spring. She killed each one, smiling as a brave chick immediately swooped down to inspect her work. "You're welcome," she whispered to the tiny bird. A movement at the tree line caught her attention. Sophia squinted, trying to see through the curtain of falling snow. There, partially hidden by the pine, stood a wolf. Even from this distance, Sophia could see the animal was thin. Too thin, its gray coat dull, its sides heaving with each breath. Fear rippled through her, but curiosity overwhelmed it. Wolves rarely came this close to human dwellings, even in harsh weather. Something must be wrong. The wolf stared at Sophia with eyes that seemed to glow amber against the white landscape. It took a hesitant step forward, then stopped as if uncertain. Sophia remembered her grandfather's warnings about wild animals, especially. Residents suspicious of the city scientist, but over the 3 years she'd been studying the local ecosystem, she'd earned respect for her knowledge and dedication. She surveyed the predators. He'd taught her to respect them, to keep her distance, but he'd also taught her that all living things deserved compassion. Without fully understanding why, Sophia slowly unzipped her lunchbox and removed the sandwich her grandmother had made, thick slices of homemade bread filled with leftover roast beef. Moving deliberately, she placed the sandwich on a flat rock near the bird feeders, then backed away. "It's okay," she said softly. Though she knew the wolf couldn't understand her words. "You need this more than I do." The wolf watched motionless as Sophia retreated toward the cabin. Only when she reached the porch did the animal cautiously approach the rock, sniff the offering, and then devour it in 3 quick bites. Sophia stood transfixed as the wolf raised its head, meeting her gaze once more before disappearing back into the trees inside. Sophia didn't mention the wolf to her grandparents. She wasn't sure why, perhaps because she feared her grandfather would bring out his rifle, or perhaps because the moment felt strangely private, a secret between her and the wild creature that night. As the temperature plummeted and the wind howled around the eaves of the cabin, Sophia lay awake thinking about the hungry wolf and wondering if her small offering had made any difference. Sophia, her grandfather's voice, urgent and strange, pulled her from sleep. The room was still dark, but Martin stood in the doorway, a flashlight in his hand. "Get up, child. You need to see this." Confused and disoriented, Sophia stumbled out of bed and followed her grandfather to the front door. Eleanor was already there, a hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Martin, what should we do?" Eleanor whispered. "I don't know." He admitted, his voice tight with tension. "I've never seen anything like this." "What is it?" Sophia asked, pushing between them to see there on the porch lay the wolf from yesterday. But it wasn't alone. Beside it, whimpering softly, was a tiny red fox kit. Its leg, clearly injured, a crude splint of twigs and bark bound around it. "That's impossible." Martin breathed. "Wolves, don't they hunt foxes? They don't help them." The wolf, closer now than yesterday, was even more obviously malnourished, its ribs visible beneath its dull coat. But its eyes were alert, fixed not on the humans, but on the injured fox kit beside it. "It's the sandwich wolf," Sophia said, causing both her grandparents to look at her sharply. "What sandwich wolf?" "Martin demanded you yesterday when I was filling the bird feeders. There was a wolf at the edge of the trees. It looked hungry, so I gave it my sandwich." She hesitated, then added, "I think it's brought us the fox because it needs help." "That's ridiculous," Elena said automatically. "Animals don't think that way." But Martin was less certain. In his decades in these mountains, he'd seen things that defied easy explanation, animals behaving in ways that made him question the line between instinct and intelligence. "The fox needs a vet," Sophia insisted. "Its leg is hurt." "Sophia, that's a wild wolf on our porch," Elena reminded her. "I'm calling Sheriff Jenkins." "No," Sophia protested. "Please, Grandma. It's not being aggressive, it's asking for help." Martin studied the scene, his weathered face thoughtful. The wolf could have eaten this fox. He observed, it's clearly starving, but it brought it here instead. He turned to Sophia. "Why do you think it came to our cabin specifically?" "Because I was kind to it," Sophia said simply. It remembered Elena made a skeptical noise, but Martin nodded slowly. "Tom Jenkins will just shoot them both," he said. "Let's call Rebecca Woods instead." The wildlife biologist. Elena asked Martin, "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. If there's anyone who might make sense of this, it's her." While Elena reluctantly made the call, Martin instructed Sophia to stay inside, but she pressed herself against the window, watching as the wolf maintained its vigilant position beside the injured fox. There was something in its posture, not threatening, but almost protective. "Dr. Woods will be here in 20 minutes. Eleanor reported, hanging up the phone. She sounded intrigued. Those 20 minutes felt like hours to Sophia. She watched as her grandfather cautiously approached the porch with a bowl of water, setting it within reach of the animals before retreating. The wolf watched him wearily, but didn't growl or flee. After he left, it lapped briefly at the water, then nudged the fox kit, helping it drink as well. "That's not normal." "Wolf behavior," Martin murmured, joining Sophia at the window. "Not at all." Finally, headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness as Dr. Woods's truck pulled up. Rebecca Woods was a tall woman with practical clothes and a non-nonsense manner that had initially made some of Frosthollow's more treated a scene from her truck, then gathered equipment from the back and approached the house. Martin met her at the side door. "I've seen a lot of unusual wildlife behavior." "Martin," she said by way of greeting, "but this is a first. You're sure the wolf brought the fox here, found them exactly as you see them when I went out to get firewood at dawn?" Martin confirmed. "Sophia says she fed the wolf yesterday." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" She glanced at Sophia, who had joined them at the door. "Will we talk about that later? For now, I need to examine that fox. The wolf, though, that's going to be tricky." "What's wrong with the wolf?" Sophia asked anxiously. Rebecca softened her tone. "It's not just hungry, Sophia. I can see from here it's severely malnourished. Probably hasn't had a proper meal in weeks, which makes its behavior with the fox even more extraordinary together." They formulated a plan. Rebecca would try to treat the fox while Martin stood by with a tranquilizer gun just in case. Elena insisted Sophia stay inside, but the girl refused to move from the window. What happened next would be the talk of Frosthollow for months to come. As Rebecca slowly approached, speaking in low, gentle tones, the wolf stood and took several steps back, not fleeing but creating space between itself and the fox, as if deliberately giving the human access to the injured animal. "I've never seen anything like it," Rebecca said later after she treated the fox's broken leg and brought it inside to recover in a makeshift pen in the Hayes' mudroom. That wolf should have either abandoned the fox or defended it aggressively. Instead, it seemed to hand it over. The wolf had retreated to the edge of the woods. Once the fox was taken inside but hadn't left completely. It remained visible, watching the cabin from a distance. "What will happen to them now?" Sophia asked, unable to tear her gaze from the wolf's distant figure. "The fox is young, probably separated from its mother. Once its leg heals, we can release it back into the wild," Rebecca explained. "As for the wolf," she hesitated, "it's in rough shape." "Sophia, I'd like to try to help it, but adult wolves are nearly impossible to treat without capturing them. And that brings its own risks." "But why was it helping the fox?" Eleanor asked. "That goes against everything I've ever heard about wolves." Rebecca shook her head. "I honestly don't know. There are rare documented cases of different species helping each other, but usually not predator and prey." She looked thoughtfully at Sophia. "Your act of kindness yesterday may have triggered something, or maybe this particular wolf is just an anomaly." By mid-morning, word had spread through Frosthollow. Sheriff Tom Jenkins arrived, his cruiser struggling through the snow-covered road to the Hayes cabin. "Heard you've got a wolf situation, Martin," he said grimly, his hand resting on his holster. "We've got a situation, Tom, but it's not what you think," Martin replied, stepping outside to intercept him before he could alarm Sophia, as the adults conferred on the porch. Martin and Rebecca advocating for caution. The sheriff pushing for more decisive action. Sophia slipped back to the window, searching for the wolf. It was still there, a gray shadow against the white landscape without the fox to protect. Sophia wondered why it stayed. "I'm going to name her Echko," she whispered to herself, though she didn't know if the wolf was male or female. The name just felt right, like an echo of something wild and ancient that had somehow found its way to her door. Little did Sophia know that this morning was just the beginning. The wolf called Echo would return again and again, each visit bringing new surprises that would eventually change not just the Hayes family but the entire town of Frosthollow. And it had all started with a simple sandwich offered without expectation on a snowy afternoon, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the most unexpected consequences. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. By afternoon, the Hayes cabin had become the center of an impromptu town meeting. Mayor Howard Wilson's SUV was parked next to Sheriff Jenkins' cruiser, and half a dozen other vehicles lined the snowy driveway. Inside, the living room was crowded with Frosthollow's most influential residents, their voices rising as the debate heated up. "It's just not natural." Jacob Miller insisted, his hunter's vest still dusted with snow from his morning trek to the cabin. "Wolves don't help foxes. That animal is sick, maybe rabid." "There's no evidence of rabies," Dr. Rebecca Wood countered, her patience wearing thin after explaining this for the third time. "Its behavior is unusual. Yes, but not aggressive or erratic. then it's been habituated to humans. Sheriff Jenkins suggested maybe tourists feeding it or in these mountains in winter. Martin Hayes shook his head. Not likely. Tom Mayor Wilson, a practical man who'd won his position by promising economic revival for the struggling town, cleared his throat. The real issue here is safety. We've got families in Frosthollow, children from her perch on the stairs where she'd been instructed to stay, but could still hear everything. Sophia frowned. The adults were talking about Echo as if she were a problem to be solved rather than a living creature in need. I've left food for it. Rebecca admitted high-protein kibble mixed with some raw venison from my research supplies. If it's as malnourished as it appears, that should help, until we can determine our next steps. Next steps? Jacob scoffed. The next step is obvious. We can't have a wild predator hanging around homes. Eleanor, who had been quietly serving coffee to their unexpected guest, spoke up. It brought an injured animal to us for help. That doesn't sound like a threat, with all due respect. Mrs. Hayes, Mayor Wilson said. One unusual incident doesn't change the fact that wolves are dangerous predators. What if it wasn't just one incident? All heads turned toward the staircase where Sophia now stood, unable to remain silent any longer. Sophia, Martin warned, the adults are talking, but they're not listening. Sophia replied, descending the last few steps. Echo isn't just any wolf, she's special. Echo. Sheriff Jenkins raised an eyebrow. That's what I named her. Sophia lifted her chin, defiant, despite the room full of adults staring at her. And she's not the only wolf out there. There are others in the woods, her family. They're hungry because of the new road. A surprised silence fell over the room. Rebecca leaned forward. What new road, Sophia? The construction site. Sophia explained, on the other side of Whispering Woods Grand, and I hiked there last fall. They're building a big road to connect to the highway. Echo's pack used to hunt in those valleys, but now they can't. All eyes turned to Mayor Wilson, whose expression had grown distinctly uncomfortable. The mountain pass development, he confirmed reluctantly. It's going to connect Frosthollow to the interstate. It's our town's best chance for economic revival, and you didn't think to mention this when we've been discussing a potentially starving wolf pack. Rebecca asked, her voice sharp. The mayor adjusted. His collar. The environmental impact studies showed minimal wildlife disruption. Clearly they were wrong, Martin said quietly outside. The wind picked up, howling around the eaves of the cabin, like a living thing through the window Sophia could see. Fresh snow beginning to fall. We need to set up trail cameras, Rebecca said. Said, already pulling out her phone. If there's a pack in trouble, we need to assess their condition. What we need is to protect our livestock and our families. Jacob insisted. If these wolves are desperate enough to approach humans, they're dangerous. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for Alina's startled cry from the kitchen. Everyone rushed to the window where she stood, pointing there in the swirling snow stood not one wolf but three. Echko was instantly recognizable to Sophia. Thinner than the others, with distinctive gray markings beside her, stood a larger, darker wolf with a scar across its muzzle, and a younger wolf barely more than a pup. That's Granite, Sophia whispered, naming the larger wolf on instinct, and the young one is Nova. How long have you been observing these wolves? Sophia, Rebecca asked quietly, while the others stared in shock. I haven't. Sophia admitted, it just feels right. Sheriff Jenkins reached for his sidearm, but Martin placed a firm hand on his arm. Not in front of my granddaughter, Tom. Rebecca was already gathering her equipment. This is unprecedented. An entire pack approaching a human dwelling without aggression. She turned to the mayor. How much of their territory has your road project disrupted? Mayor Wilson had the grace to look embarrassed. The construction covers about 15 square miles, but it's all been approved by 15 square miles of prime hunting ground. Rebecca interrupted. No wonder they're starving, as the adults argued. Sophia slipped on her coat and boots. Elena noticed too late. Sophia, don't you dare. But the girl was already on the porch, moving slowly, deliberately. The wolves watched her ears, alert, bodies tense but not aggressive. Sophia, hey, you get back here this instant. Her grandmother called, panic evident in her voice. Inside, chaos erupted. Sheriff Jenkins and Jacob moved toward the door while Martin and Rebecca tried to block them. Wait, Rebecca insisted. Look at the wolves' body language. They're not threatening her, indeed. The wolves remained at a distance, making no move to approach Sophia. Echo took a single step forward, then back, as if uncertain. "They need food?" Sophia called. Over her shoulder, "They're just hungry." Martin pushed past the others and stepped onto the porch. Behind his granddaughter Sophia, he said calmly, "Come back inside slowly, but Grandpa, I'll help them," he promised, "but you need to come inside first." Reluctantly, Sophia retreated to the doorway as soon as she was safe. Sheriff Jenkins moved to the porch, hand still on his weapon. Tom Martin warned, "If you draw that gun, our friendship is over." The tension between the two men was palpable until Rebecca joined them on the porch carrying a large bag of kibble from her truck. "This isn't a permanent solution," she said, tearing open the bag, "but it's a start. With careful movements, she spread the food in a wide arc at the edge of the yard. The wolves watched, alert but patient, only moving toward the offering after the humans had retreated to the porch. "I've never seen anything like it," Mayor Wilson murmured, watching through the window. "They're not aggressive," Rebecca explained. "They're desperate. There's a difference." As the wolves ate, Sophia studied them. Echo was clearly subordinate to Granite the Large. Male, she presumed, was the Alpha Nova. The younger wolf stayed close to Echo, a family Sophia thought just like hers. Trying to survive by dusk, the impromptu town meeting had evolved into a planning session. Not everyone was convinced, but Rebecca's expertise in the wolves' non-aggressive behavior had at least earned them a temporary reprieve. "We'll set up feeding stations away from town," Rebecca decided, "just until we can find a more permanent solution." "And what might that be?" Jacob asked skeptically. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But wiping out a wolf pack isn't the answer. They're a keystone species. Remove them and the entire ecosystem suffers." Mayor Wilson rubbed his temples, clearly calculating the political cost of every option. "The development can't be stopped. Construction contracts are signed. People are counting on those jobs. Maybe there's a compromise." Martin suggested a wildlife corridor, something to give the wolves back some of their territory without halting progress entirely. The idea hung in the air, neither accepted nor rejected. As the meeting broke up, Rebecca took Sophia aside. "You did a brave thing today," she said, "foolish, but brave." Sophia smiled. "Echo wouldn't hurt me, I know it." "Maybe not," Rebecca conceded. "But wild animals are unpredictable, especially when hungry. Promise me you won't approach them alone again." Reluctantly, Sophia promised. But as she watched Echo and her pack retreat into the gathering darkness, she felt a certainty that defied explanation. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. That night, as a snowstorm howled outside, Sophia lay awake, listening to her grandparents' muffled conversation. "It's too dangerous," Elena was saying. "We should send her to her parents until this is resolved and tell them what Martin counted, that their daughter is feeding wolves. Sarah would have a heart attack. Better a heart attack than a wolf attack." "Eleanor, you saw those wolves today. They weren't threatening. They were asking for help. They're wild animals. Martin, they don't ask for anything. Then how do you explain what's happened? The fox, the pack coming here?" Specifically, Eleanor had no answer for that in her bed. Sophia clutched her favorite stuffed animal, a wolf her father had given her years ago. Tomorrow, she decided she would find a way to help Echo and her family. The adults might not understand, but she did. Sometimes being hungry was enough to make you do unexpected things. And sometimes kindness was the only language everyone understood. The next morning, Frosthollow awoke to another foot of snow, and the news that more was on the way. School was canceled, businesses closed, and most residents stayed home, feeding their wood stoves and watching through windows as winter tightened its grip on the small mountain town. At the Hayes cabin, Sophia convinced her grandfather to help her prepare food for the wolves. Leftover stew meat, some chicken that was about to expire, and the high-protein kibble Rebecca had left. Dr. Woods said not to feed them directly. Martin reminded her as they worked they need to maintain their fear of humans. "It's too late for that with Echo," Sophia replied, scooping kibble into a container. Martin couldn't argue. The female wolf's behavior already defied conventional wisdom about her species. They drove Martin's old truck as far as they could toward the feeding station Rebecca had established at the edge of Whispering Woods, then hiked the rest of the way, pulling a sled loaded with supplies. The snow was thigh-deep in places, the cold biting through their layers. "Your grandmother will have my hide for this," Martin grumbled, but his eyes twinkled in truth. He was as curious about the wolves as Sophia at the feeding station. A simple, platform built to keep the food above snow level. They found tracks the wolves had been there, but the platform was empty. They're still hungry, Sophia said. Unloading their supplies, Rebecca can't feed the entire pack. Indefinitely, Martin cautioned they need to hunt, but there's nothing to hunt because of the road. Sophia frowned. It's not fair. Martin sighed, looking out across the snow-covered landscape. Life rarely is, sweetheart, as they worked. Sophia felt eyes. On them she turned slowly, and there at the edge of the trees stood Echko. The wolf watched them, her breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. Grandpa, Sophia whispered, nodding toward the trees. Martin straightened, moving carefully. Keep still, he advised. Let her come to us if she wants. For a long moment nothing happened. Then with hesitant steps, Echo emerged from the trees. She kept a cautious distance but moved close enough for Sophia to see her amber eyes clearly. Hello again, Sophia said softly to her amazement. Echo sat down in the snow, still watching them. It was such a domestic gesture, so unlike what Sophia had expected from a wild predator, that she couldn't help smiling. See, Grandpa, she remembers me. It seems she does, Martin admitted, wonder evident in his voice. Though I'm still not sure what to make of it. They finished preparing the feeding station, all while Echo observed from her self-imposed distance. When they were done, Martin gently tugged Sophia's sleeve. Time to go, sweetheart, let her eat in peace. Reluctantly, Sophia turned to leave, but not before addressing the wolf once more. We'll be back, Echo, I promise. As they trudged back toward the truck, Sophia looked over her shoulder. Echo remained where she was, a gray sentinel against the white landscape, watching them depart unknown to either Sophia or Martin. They were being watched by another set of eyes from the cab of his pickup parked on a service road near the development site. Jacob Miller lowered his binoculars, his expression hardened as he reached for his CB radio. Carl, it's Jacob. You're not going to believe what I just saw at the Hayes place. We've got a situation on our hands, and the mayor's not doing a damn thing about it. Time to take matters into our own hands. The friction in Frosthollow was just beginning. As Sophia and her grandfather returned home unaware of Jacob's surveillance, the battle lines were being drawn, and somewhere in the snow-covered woods a pack of wolves fought for survival, with one unusual member forming a bridge between two worlds that had long been separate. A storm was coming to Frosthollow, and not just the one forecasted on the weather report. The news about the wolves spread through Frosthollow like wildfire. By the following morning, the town had effectively split into two camps: those who believed the wolves posed an imminent threat, and those who were fascinated by their unusual behavior, particularly Echoes at Miller's General Store, the unofficial hub of town gossip. Jacob Miller held court among his supporters. Rebecca Woods means, well, he told the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the cramped aisles, stocked with canned goods and emergency supplies. Lies, but she's blinded by her love of wildlife. These are apex predators. We're talking about G-San in Idaho. Lost 3 sheep to wolves last year. Someone contributed, and they're getting bolder, added Carl Thompson, the elderly rancher, who owned most of the grazing land on the eastern edge of town, coming right up to the hay cabin in broad daylight. Patricia Miller, restocking shelves behind her husband, frowned. Jacob, Sophia Hayes said the wolf actually brought an injured fox to her. That doesn't sound like typical predator behavior. Exactly my point, Jacob replied. Something's wrong with these wolves' disease, maybe all the more reason to handle this before it gets out of hand. At the back of the store, Sheriff Jenkins was examining the ammunition display. He'd remained largely silent during the debate, caught between his duty to protect the town and his lifelong friendship with Martin Hayes. Tom, Jacob called to him. You've been quiet. What's the official position here? Jenkins sighed, turning to face the expectant crowd. Officially, we're monitoring the situation. Dr. Woods has set up cameras and feeding stations. Mayor Wilson has requested assistance from state wildlife officials. And unofficially, Carl pressed the sheriff's weathered face, revealed his internal conflict. Unofficially, I've never seen wolves act this way. It's concerning. Across town at the elementary school, Sophia had become a reluctant celebrity, though classes had resumed after the brief weather closure. Little learning was taking place as children pestered her with questions about her wolves. Did it try to bite you? Are you going to keep the fox as a pet? My dad says they should shoot all the wolves before someone gets hurt. This last comment came from Zach Wilson. The mayor's nephew and a notorious troublemaker. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. Your dad is wrong, she retorted. The wolves aren't hurting anyone, they're just hungry because people are building on their land. My uncle says that road will save Frosthollow. Zach counted. My dad's got a construction contract worth more than your grandpa's cabin before Sophia could respond. Mrs. Miller, who thought the combined 4th and 5th grades, intervened. That's enough, children. Sophia is not the wolf expert, and we have math to focus on. But as she returned to the lesson, Mrs. Miller gave Sophia a small, reassuring smile. Not everyone in town was against the wolves, it seemed, after school. Sophia found Dr. Rebecca Woods waiting outside, leaning against her mud-splattered truck. Need a ride home, the biologist offered. Sophia glanced around nervously. I'm supposed to wait for Grandma. I called her already. She said it was fine. Rebecca assured her, I wanted to talk to you about Eco inside the warm truck. Rebecca showed Sophia images captured by the trail cameras. Look at this, she said, pointing to a nighttime shot of Echo and Granite. They came back to the feeding station 3 times last night. They're definitely hungry. Can't you give them more food? Sophia asked Rebecca. Shook her head. It's complicated. Supplemental feeding can create dependency. We want to help them through this crisis, not domesticate them. She paused. There's something else. Look at this footage. She showed Sophia another image. Echo approaching the platform alone, carrying something in her mouth. Is that Sophia squinted at the grainy image? A rabbit. Rebecca confirmed, a freshly caught rabbit that she left on the platform. Sophia's eyes widened. She brought us a gift. That's one interpretation. Rebecca said cautiously. It's also possible she was bringing food for the younger pack members and got startled, but either way, it's fascinating. Behavior. As they drove toward the Hayes cabin, Rebecca broached the real reason for their conversation. Sophia, I need your help. Mayor Wilson has arranged a town hall meeting for tomorrow night. The state wildlife officials will be there, along with representatives from the construction company. What can I do? Sophia asked. You have a special connection with Echo, the way you talk about her. It helps people see the wolves differently, as individuals, not just as threats. Sophia considered this. Grandma says I shouldn't get involved in adult business. This isn't just adult business. Rebecca replied. It's about finding a way for humans and wildlife to coexist, and sometimes it takes a child's perspective to help adults see what really matters. When they arrived at the cabin, they found Martin on the porch, his expression grim. Elena stood beside him, wringing her pans. What's happened? Rebecca asked as they approached. Martin handed her a flyer. These are all over town. The paper featured a crudely photoshopped image of a snarling wolf with blood-covered fangs above it. Bold letters proclaimed, Protect our children. Emergency meeting. Wolf hunting permits. Jacob Miller. Martin said, disgusted evident in his voice. He's organizing his own meeting tonight, trying to undercut the official town hall tomorrow. He can't do that. Rebecca protested. There's a process for wildlife management decisions. Tell that to Jacob Ellen. Aside, he's got half the town whipped into a frenzy. Sophia stared at the horrifying image of the wolf. It looked nothing like Echo, nothing like any of the wolves she'd encountered. It's all lies, she whispered. Fear is a powerful motivator, Martin said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, and frightened people rarely make wise decisions. That evening, while Jacob's meeting gathered momentum at the local church hall, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Hayes cabin. Mayor Wilson's SUV pulled up, its headlights cutting through the early darkness of the winter evening. Sorry to drop by unannounced, he said when Martin answered the door. But things are moving quickly, and I thought you should know. Inside, the mayor accepted a cup of coffee from Elena before getting to the point. Jacob Miller has gathered quite a crowd. He's calling for an emergency. Cull wants to issue special hunting permits to protect the town. He can't do that without proper authorization. Rebecca protested. Technically, no, the mayor conceded. But if enough people report feeling threatened, the state could declare an emergency exception to normal wildlife protocols. Martin's eyes narrowed. And where do you stand on this? Howard? The mayor shifted uncomfortably. I'm In a difficult position, the development project means jobs, tax revenue, a future for Frosthollow. But I'm not comfortable with vigilante wolf hunting either. Then stop it. Sophia blurted out, unable to remain silent any longer. The adults turned to her, surprised by her vehement, "It's not that simple." Young Lady Mayor Wilson said kindly, "There are many factors to consider, like votes." Martin suggested, his tone sharper than usual. The mayor flushed. "That's unfair. Martin, is it you approved that development? Without proper wildlife impact studies, now we're facing the consequences. And you're still sitting on the fence." Before the mayor could respond, Sophia's attention was drawn to the window. "Look," she gasped. There, illuminated by the porch light, stood Echo, but something was wrong. The wolf was limping badly, her gray coat stained with something dark. "She's hurt," Sophia cried, already moving toward the door. "Sophia, wait," Elena called, but the girl was already on the porch. Echo watched her approach, making no move to flee despite her obvious injury. As Sophia drew closer, she could see what appeared to be a wound on the wolf's left flank. "Someone shot her," Rebecca said quietly. Having followed Sophia outside, the wound pattern is consistent with buckshot," Jacob Martin growled. Mayor Wilson looked genuinely distressed. "I didn't authorize this, Martin. You have to believe me. Believing you isn't the issue, Howard. Stopping this madness is." While the adults argued, Sophia focused on Echko. The wolf remained just beyond the porch steps, swaying slightly. Her breathing labored. "We need to help her," Sophia pleaded. Rebecca nodded, already retrieving her medical kit from her truck. "If she'll let us get close enough." To everyone's amazement, Echo slowly lowered herself to the snow-covered ground as Sophia approached, almost as if surrendering to their care. "This is unprecedented," Rebecca murmured. Kneeling beside the injured wolf, she should be retreating to the safety of her pack, not seeking human assistance. "She trusts us," Sophia said simply. "She remembers that we helped." Before, as Rebecca worked to clean and treat Echo's wounds, the mayor paced nervously. "If word gets out that I was here while you treated a wolf that someone shot, then stand up and do what's right," Howard Martin challenged. "Be the leader. Frosthollow needs not the one Jacob Miller wants." The mayor stopped pacing, watching as Sophia gently stroked his head while Rebecca worked. The wolf's eyes remained fixed on the girl, showing no aggression. Despite the pain she must have been feeling, it really is extraordinary, he admitted. "I've never seen anything like it now. Imagine explaining to your constituents why killing these animals is the only solution," Martin suggested. Something shifted in the mayor's expression. "The town hall meeting tomorrow. We need to show people this connection. If they could see what we're seeing right now, too dangerous." Elena objected immediately. "I won't have Sophia paraded in front of an angry crowd with a wild animal. Not with Echo." Rebecca agreed. "But we have footage, data, evidence of unusual intelligence and non-aggressive behavior." She paused, looking up from her work. "And we have Sophia's testimony." "I want to speak," Sophia said firmly. "For Echo, for all the wolves." Martin and Eleanor exchanged worried glances. "Sweetheart, people are very upset right now," Martin explained gently. "It might not be safe." "Echo wasn't safe either," Sophia pointed out, "but she still came to us for help." That simple observation hung in the air, challenging the adults to match a wild animal's courage and trust. Finally, the mayor nodded. "I'll make sure security is tight, and I'll speak with the state wildlife officials before the meeting. Prepare." Then, for what we've witnessed, Rebecca finished treating Echo's wounds. Fortunately, the buckshot had only grazed her, painful but not life-threatening. "She needs rest and antibiotics," she said, administering an injection. "Ideally, we'd keep her under observation, but she's wild." Martin finished, "Not a pet," as if understanding their concerns. Echo struggled to her feet. Once Rebecca was done, she stood shakily, looking at each human in turn before her gaze settled on Sophia. "Get better," Sophia whispered. "Stay away from men with guns," to everyone's astonishment. Echo moved forward and briefly pressed her muzzle against Sophia's outstretched hand, a fleeting contact that seemed to defy everything they understood about why wild wolves. Then she turned and limped slowly back toward the safety of the forest. "Well, I'll be damned," Mayor Wilson breathed. "Now, do you understand?" Martin asked quietly. "This isn't just about wildlife management or development projects. Something extraordinary is happening here. The mayor nodded slowly. I'm beginning to, as Echo disappeared into the darkness. Sophia felt a mixture of worry and determination. Tomorrow's town hall meeting would decide the fate of the wolf pack, and possibly the future of Frosthollow itself. What none of them knew was that Jacob Miller and his supporters weren't waiting for official decisions even as Echo made her painful journey back to her pack plans, were being made to track the wolves to their den and eliminate what Jacob called the threat once and for all. And beyond the human conflicts brewing in, town nature itself was preparing to test Frosthollow's resilience. The weather station 50 Mi West had just issued a severe storm warning, a potential blizzard of historic proportions heading directly for the mountain valley. The winds of change were blowing toward Frosthollow from multiple directions, and when they converged, nothing would be the same again. The Frosthollow Community Center had never been so crowded by 6 hours. Every folding chair was filled with dozens more people standing. Along the walls, the tension in the room was palpable as neighbors who had known each other for generations now sat divided, casting suspicious glances across the invisible line that separated the pro-wolf and anti-wolf factions. At the front of the room, a long table had been set up for the panel. Mayor Wilson at the center, flanked by Rebecca Woods and a stern-looking woman in the Department of Wildlife uniform on one side, Sheriff Jenkins and Robert Mitchell from the construction company on the other. In the front row, Martin and Alina sat with Sophia between them. The girl clutched a folder containing the speech she had carefully written that afternoon, her knuckles white with nervous energy. "Remember," Martin whispered to her, "just speak from your heart. That's all anyone can ask." Mayor Wilson tapped the microphone, bringing the murmuring crowd to attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know emotions are running high, but I ask that we maintain civility and respect as we discuss this important issue facing our community." From the back of the room, Jacob Miller called out, "Let's skip the pleasantries, Howard. We all know why we're here. Those wolves are a danger to Frosthollow, plain and simple." Several voices rose in agreement, while others objected, creating a wave of discord that the mayor struggled to quell. "Mr. Miller, everyone will have a chance to speak," he insisted. "But first, I'd like to introduce our guest, Dr. Rebecca Woods, wildlife biologist who's been monitoring the situation, Miss Andrea Larson from the State Department of Wildlife, Sheriff Tom Jenkins, and Mr. Robert Mitchell, project manager for the Mountain Pass development." Andrea Larson leaned forward into her microphone before we opened the floor. "I'd like to clarify the state's position. Wolf management is governed by clear protocols without verified attacks on humans or significant livestock predation. A cull would not be authorized. What about the safety of our children?" A woman near the back shouted, "There have been no aggressive encounters." Rebecca counted, rising to her feet. "In fact, what we've observed is quite the opposite." She activated a projector displaying the trail camera images. "This female wolf, whom Sophia Hayes has named Echo, has demonstrated unprecedented behavior." The room quieted somewhat as Rebecca showed the footage. Echo bringing the rabbit to the feeding station, the pack maintaining a respectful distance from the cabin, and most dramatically Echo allowing Rebecca to treat her wounds. "In my 20 years studying wolves, I've never seen anything like this." She concluded, "These aren't just random wolves, they're a displaced pack demonstrating remarkable adaptation and intelligence." Robert Mitchell cleared his throat uncomfortably when Rebecca sat down. "While these observations are interesting, they don't change the economic realities facing Frosthollow. The Mountain Pass development represents a $12 million investment in this community's future. Over 100 jobs, increased tourism tax revenue for schools and infrastructure. And what's the cost?" Martin called out from his seat, "Not just to the wolves, but to everything that makes Frosthollow special. Our connection to the wilderness." Mitchell's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Mr. Hayes' nostalgia doesn't pay bills. Half the storefronts on Main Street are empty. Young people are leaving for opportunities elsewhere. This town is dying." The bluntest assessment hung in the air, its truth undeniable to everyone present. Frosthollow had been in decline for years, each winter seeing fewer businesses reopen. "In spring, perhaps," Mayor Wilson suggested carefully. "There's a middle path. Dr. Woods has proposed a wildlife corridor that would allow the wolves access to traditional hunting grounds while preserving the essential elements of the development. That would mean redesign significant portions of the project." Mitchell objected delays, additional costs, which pale in comparison to the ecological costs of the current plan. Rebecca interjected as the debate intensified. Sophia tugged on her grandfather's sleeve. "They're just talking about money," she whispered. "Nobody's talking about Echo." Martin patted her hand. "Patience, sweetheart. Your turn is coming finally after nearly an hour of increasingly heated exchanges." Mayor Wilson opened the floor to community comments. Jacob Miller was the first to the microphone. "I've lived in these mountains my entire life," he began. "My grandfather taught me that wolves and humans can't coexist. It's not about hating nature, it's about respecting its power. These wolves are starving, desperate. That makes them dangerous regardless of how they've behaved so far." He turned, pointing directly at Martin and Sophia. "The Hayes family has always been good people, but they're wrong on this. That little girl's fascination with these predators is putting everyone at risk. It's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt." When Jacob finished, several others followed with similar sentiments. Fear permeated their words. Fear for their children, their livestock, their way of life. Then Patricia Miller approached the microphone. The school teacher's voice was softer than the others, requiring the crowd to quiet down to hear her. "I've taught the children of Frosthollow for 23 years, she said. "I've watched this town struggle. I understand the appeal of the development project." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I also remember what my grandmother told me about these mountains before the logging companies came, before the old mine call collapsed. Wolves were plentiful here. And contrary to the stories we've all heard, attacks on humans were virtually non-existent." She gestured toward Sophia. "Children often see things more clearly than adults. They haven't learned to fear what's different. Perhaps instead of teaching Sophia to fear the wolves, we should let her teach us something about coexistence." A thoughtful silence followed her words, broken only when Mayor Wilson called Sophia's name. Elena squeezed her granddaughter's hand anxiously as the girl approached the microphone, which Mayor Wilson lowered for her. Sophia placed her prepared speech on the podium, then looked out at the sea of adult faces, some friendly, some hostile, most simply curious about what this child could possibly contribute to such a complex discussion. "My name is Sophia Hayes," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm 10 years old and I know Echo isn't just a wolf. She's someone who thinks and feels and tries to take care of her family just like all of you." She abandoned her written speech, the words suddenly seeming too formal to adult. Instead, she simply described her experiences: the first encounter in the snow, Echko, bringing the injured fox Kit, the wolf's return with her wound. "She could have gone anywhere when she was hurt," Sophia pointed out, "but she came to us because she remembered kindness. She remembered that humans had helped before." She looked directly at Jacob Miller. "You say wolves and humans can't live together, but Echo is already proving that's not true. She's trying really hard. She brought us a rabbit as a thank you gift. She let Dr. Woods touch her when she was hurt. She's doing her part. Why can't we do ours?" Sophia's simple question cut through the policy debate and economic considerations for a moment. The room was completely silent. Then Henry Blackwood, the town's eldest resident and unofficial historian, slowly rose from his seat. "The child's right," he said, his voice creaking with age. "When I was a boy, my grandfather showed me cave paintings up in Silver Rest Mountains made by the original people who lived here. Those paintings showed humans and wolves hunting together, not as enemies, as partners." He shook his head slowly. "We forgot that history. Maybe it's time we remembered it." Before anyone could respond, the community center doors burst open. Bill Rodriguez, the forest ranger, stood there, snow covering his uniform. "Sorry to interrupt," he called out, "but everyone needs to hear this. The Weather Service has upgraded the storm watch to a blizzard warning. It's going to hit within 24 hours, and they're saying it could be the worst in 50 years. Power outages, impassable roads, the works." The meeting immediately dissolved into practical concerns as Mayor Wilson and Sheriff Jenkins began organizing emergency preparations. The wolf debate wasn't forgotten, but it was temporarily set aside in the face of a more immediate threat. The storm arrived with a vengeance. What had begun as gent snowfall quickly transformed into howling winds that bent pine trees like blades of grass. Temperature plummeted, turning the air into a weapon that sliced through layers of clothing and froze exposed skin. Within minutes, in the hay cabin, Elena paced anxiously by the radio, waiting for Martin's hourly check-in. The last call had been worrying. He and Rebecca had found Jacob's truck abandoned near a service road, but no sign of the men themselves. They were continuing toward the cave system where they believed the wolves had dened, but visibility was deteriorating rapidly. They should turn back. Elena uttered to herself, "The wolves aren't worth this risk." From the living room, she heard Sophia's voice. "They are to me, Grandma." Elena turned surprised to find her granddaughter bundled in her winter clothes, snow pants, her thickest sweat-better boots, already laced. "What do you think you're doing, young lady? I heard Grandpa on the radio. They're lost." Sophia's expression was determined. "Beyond her years, I know where the cave is. I can help." Elena's face paled. "Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere, in this weather. But Echo needs me." Sophia protested. "I promised I'd help her. Your grandfather and Dr. Woods will handle it." Eleanor insisted, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. The storm was far worse than forecasted, arriving hours earlier and with greater intensity, as if to emphasize the danger. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging the cabin into darkness, broken only by the orange glow from the wood stove generator. Elena sighed, reaching for the flashlight. "They kept by the door. Stay here, Sophia. I'll go start it." The moment her grandmother stepped onto the porch, Sophia made her decision. She grabbed her backpack, already secretly packed with a flashlight, compass, snacks, and a first aid kit, and slipped out the back door. She knew she'd be in tremendous trouble later, but some things were more important than rules. Echo had come to her for help when injured. Now Sophia would return the favor. The bitter cold hit her like a physical blow as she battled through snowdrifts already reaching her knees in places Sophia had grown up in. These woods knew them intimately in all seasons, but tonight everything looked different, transformed by snow and darkness into an alien landscape. She oriented herself using landmarks her grandfather had taught her: the distinct silhouette of Widow's Peak to the north, the bend in Meadow Creek to the east. The cave system lay 2 miles into the forest, a distance Sophia had hiked many times during summer. Tonight, in these conditions, it might as well have been 20 miles still. She pressed forward, one laborious step after another. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Martin and Rebecca had abandoned their vehicle when the snow became too deep to navigate. They continued on foot, following what they believed were the tracks of Jacob's group, though the rapidly falling snow made tracking nearly impossible. "We should turn back," Rebecca shouted over the wind. "This is becoming too dangerous." Martin paused, shining his flashlight through the swirling snow. 5 more minutes. The cave system should be just beyond that ridge. As they struggled forward, another group faced their own crisis. Jacob Miller, Carl Thompson, and 3 other men had indeed set out to find the wolf den, rifles loaded and determination fueling their mission. But the early arrival of the storm had disoriented them, sending them in circles until they stumbled upon an abandoned ranger cabin, little more than a shack, but shelter nonetheless. This was a mistake, one of the men admitted as they huddled inside, the wind threatening to tear the roof from above them. "Those wolves aren't worth dying over. We wouldn't be in this mess if the Hayes family and that wildlife woman hadn't interfered," Jacob insisted, though his bravado was fading in the face of nature's fury. "The wolves are dangerous. They need to be eliminated." Carl, the oldest of the group, stared thoughtfully into the small fire they'd managed to build. "My grandfather used to tell stories about wolves," he said slowly. "Not as enemies, but as teachers said. They showed the early settlers how to survive these winters, hunting in packs, sharing food, protecting the vulnerable. Sounds like something Henry Blackwood would say." Jacob scoffed, romanticizing predators. "Maybe," Carl conceded, "or maybe we forgot something important." Along the way, their philosophical debate was interrupted by a sound that cut through even the howling wind. A wolf's howl, close enough to raise the hair on their necks. In another part of the forest, the wolf pack faced their own struggle for survival. The cave provided shelter from the direct assault of the storm, but the bitter cold penetrated even there. The pack huddled together for warmth. Granite, Echo Nova, and 2 other adult wolves. They had managed to bring down a deer 3 days earlier, but little remained of the carcass, and hunting in these conditions was impossible. Echo lay slightly apart from the others, her wounded flank still painful. Despite Rebecca's treatment, she raised her head, suddenly ears alert, sensing something the others had not yet detected: a familiar scent carried on the wind, the human cub who had shown kindness. But why would the girl be in the forest during such a storm? Without hesitation, Echo rose to her feet and moved toward the cave entrance. Granite growled, softly a warning against leaving safety, but Echo had made her decision. She slipped out into the blizzard, immediately buffeted by winds that nearly knocked her off her feet. Following her instincts and her keen sense of smell, Echo began tracking Sophia through the snow-covered forest. The girl had made remarkable progress given the conditions, but now she was in trouble, disoriented by the whiteout conditions and numbed by cold. Sophia had veered off course instead of approaching the cave system. She was heading toward treacherous terrain, a series of ravines that would be nearly invisible under the snow. Echo, she called Fuley, her voice swallowed by the wind. Grandpa. Her foot slipped on an ice-covered rock, sending her tumbling down a slope. She came to rest against a fallen tree. The breath knocked from her lungs as she struggled to rise. Pain shot through her ankle, sprained or broken. She couldn't tell. But walking would be difficult, if not impossible. Fear gripped her. For the first time, the temperature was dropping further, and she knew the dangers of exposure. Her mother's warnings about winter survival. Martin pounded on the door. Jacob, anyone, I need help. The door swung open, revealing Jacob's surprised face. Hayes, what the hell are you doing out in this? Sophia's missing, Martin said without preamble. She went looking for the wolves for us. She's out in this storm alone. The gravity of the situation transcended their disagreements. How long? Jacob demanded, already reaching for his coat. At least an hour. Maybe 2. Martin's voice broke. She's 10 years old. Jacob, whatever you think about the wolves, help me find my granddaughter. The men exchanged a long look. Decades of community bonds overriding recent conflicts. Carl, you and the others stay here. Keep the fire going, Jacob instructed Martin, and I will search for the girl together. The unlikely pair ventured back into the storm, calling Sophia's name into the howling wind. Meanwhile, Echo guided Sophia through the forest with uncanny precision, avoiding dangerous terrain and finding the most sheltered path. Despite Echo's help, Sophia was weakening, the cold seeping through her layers, her injured ankle throbbing with pain. I need to rest. She mumbled her words, slurring slightly. A dangerous sign of hypothermia setting in. Echo whined anxiously, nudging her to keep moving when Sophia stumbled again. The wolf changed direction, leading her toward what appeared to be a solid wall of snow and rock. Only as they drew closer did Sophia realize it was the entrance to a small cave. Not the main den system, but a satellite shelter inside. The relief from the wind was immediate. Echo guided Sophia to the back of the cave, where, to the girls' surprise, the young wolf, Nova, was already huddled. The smaller wolf had apparently sought separate shelter from the main pack. Hello again, Sophia, whispered, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. Nova regarded her wearily but didn't retreat. As Sophia collapsed against the cave, all Echo circled the small space restlessly before settling beside Sophia, pressing her warm body against the shivering girl. After a moment's hesitation, Nova approached from the other side, adding her warmth sandwiched between the two wolves. Sophia felt the deadly chill begin to recede. Thank you, she murmured, her eyelids growing heavy. She knew she should stay awake, but exhaustion pulled her at her with irresistible force. Echo nudged her sharply, then rose and moved to the cave entrance. The wolf looked back at Sophia, then out into the storm, then back at Sophia again. You're going for help, Sophia realized, but how will you find anyone in this? Echo's only answer was to slip out into the blizzard, leaving Sophia with Nova. The younger wolf shifted closer, maintaining the precious warmth Sophia needed to survive outside. The storm had become a white hell of wind and ice, yet through this maelstrom, Echo moved with determination, following sense that even the blizzard couldn't entirely erase the wound in her flank, burned with each movement. But she pressed on, driven by an instinct even she didn't fully understand. Nearly a mile away, Martin and Jacob trudged through the snow, their calls for Sophia growing, sir, their hope fading with each minute. No child could survive these conditions for long. We need to be realistic, Jacob finally said, his voice grim. We might be looking for a body. Don't, Martin warned, the single word containing a lifetime of paternal fear. She's smart, she knows these woods. Not in a storm like this, Jacob replied more gently this time. No one does. They were about to turn back when something moved in the swirling snow ahead, a gray shape materializing like a ghost. Jacob instinctively raised his rifle. Wait. Martin grabbed the barrel, forcing it down. It's one of the wolves. Echo stood 30 effing away clearly, visible despite the storm. She stared directly at them, then turned and took several steps before looking back again. I think Martin's voice caught. I think she wants us to follow her. Jacob scoffed. That's ridiculous. Wolves don't. My granddaughter is dying out there. Martin cut him off. If there's even a chance this wolf knows where she is. I'm following. After a moment's hesitation, Jacob nodded, led on. Then Echo maintained a distance, always visible, but never close enough to touch guiding. The men through the blinding snow when Martin stumbled in exhaustion. Jacob helped him up the two old adversaries, united in their desperate mission. Finally, Echo led them to the small cave inside. They found Sophia, pale but alive, curled against Nova for warmth, Grandpa, she whispered as Martin gathered her in his arms, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks. You're safe now, he assured her, checking her injured ankle with gentle hands. We're going to get you home. Jacob stood at the cave entrance, watching Echo, who had completed her mission and now waited at a cautious distance for the first time. He saw not a predator, but an intelligent creature who had saved a human child at risk to herself. I've been wrong, he admitted quietly, the words nearly lost in the howling wind outside. About many things. The storm raged on, trapping the unlikely group in the small cave throughout the night by unspoken agreement. The wolves remained, their body heat critical to everyone's survival. As the long hours passed, the barriers between species and between neighbors began to dissolve. By morning, when the storm finally began to ease, something fundamental had changed in the forest outside Frosthollow, and as rescue teams finally reached their location, the sight that greeted them would rewrite the town's relationship with its wild neighbors. Forever dawn broke over a transformed landscape. The blizzard had dropped nearly 4 feet of snow, burying Frosthollow in the surrounding wilderness. In a pristine white blanket, the wind had sculpted massive drifts against buildings and hillsides, rendering most roads impossible. When the storm finally subsided, enough for the rescue operations to begin, Sheriff Jenkins organized 3 teams, one headed toward the cave system where Rebecca had last reported her position, another toward the Ranger Sea cabin where Jacob's group had initially sheltered, and a third following Eleanor's directions to search for Martin and Sophia. What they discovered in that small cave would become the tour of Frosthollow. For generations, Deputy Mike Peterson spotted the cave entrance nearly hidden by a snowdrift. Sheriff, over here. As the rescue team approached, a remarkable scene came into view. Martin Hayes sat with his back against the cave wall, his granddaughter cradled in his arms, both wrapped in emergency blankets from Martin's pack beside them. Incredibly, sat Jacob Miller, the town's most vocal wolf opponent, and curled nearby, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly part of the group were 2 wolves, Echo and Nova. Don't make any sudden movements, Jenkins called softly to his team. Those wolves aren't acting aggressive, but let's not provoke them. They saved my granddaughter's life. Tom Martin responded, his voice hoarse from the cold. They're not going to hurt anyone. The sheriff approached cautiously, medical kit in hand. Sophia needs a hospital, he said after a quick assessment. That ankle is definitely broken and she's showing signs of hypothermia, despite your best efforts. As the rescue team prepared a stretcher, Echo retreated further into the cave, watching wearily. Nova followed her, lead, both wolves clearly uncomfortable with the number of humans now crowding their temporary shelter. Wait, Sophia said weakly, as they lifted her onto the stretcher. Echo, please don't hurt them. No one's going to hurt these wolves, Jacob said, surprising. Everyone present, not today. Not after what they did. Sheriff Jenkins raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change of heart. Jacob the hunter met his gaze steadily. You weren't here last night, Tom. You didn't see that wolf track through a blizzard to bring help for a child. I've been hunting these mountains for 40 years and never seen anything like it. He glanced at the wolves, a mixture of respect and lingering weariness in his expression. There's more to these animals than I understood. As they prepared to transport Sophia, Eleanor arrived with the 3rd search team rushing to her granddaughter's side. Oh, thank God. She breathed, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. When I realized you were gone. I'm sorry, Grandma Sophia whispered. But I had to. Help. Echo. Ella glanced at the wolves, then back to her granddaughter. Looks like she helped you instead. Once Sophia was stabilized on the stretcher, a new problem presented itself. The terrain was too difficult to car carry her all the way back to town.